Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump on the chances of a meeting with Russia's Vladimir Putin in Budapest, and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban hailing a new golden age of U.S.-Hungary relations. More than 2,000 flights have been delayed or canceled this morning after the FAA initiated cuts at 40 major airports as the shutdown drags on. What to know if you're flying or booking flights in the near future. Cornell University has agreed to pay $60 million in order to get federal funding back. The Ivy League institution must also comply with civil rights laws. The state of Michigan concerned by the constant probing of military installations by Chinese nationals. The head of the Michigan National Guard says these are not isolated incidents.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for joining us today. 2 steps forward and 1 step back. A deal to reopen the government was looking hopeful, but now it's unclear where support stands. Are there enough Democrats willing to break ranks to turn the lights back on today? NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
Senators expected to meet this afternoon for a 15th vote on reopening the government. Leadership is eyeing a mini package that would fully fund parts of the government while patching funds for the rest until January, plus a promised Obamacare vote. Senate Leader John Thune visibly heated on the floor after reports that this offer was not enough to satisfy Democrats.
Will the far left not be satisfied until federal workers and military families are getting their Thanksgiving dinner from a food bank? Because that's where we're headed.
A key Democrat negotiator told reporters he doesn't expect the shutdown to end soon because they, quote, have to make sure we get a deal that we can get broad support for.
Because we were hearing that there were some common sense centrist Democrats who were talking to Republicans, but what I understand is that Chuck Schumer has pulled them back from that, and that they're being instructed and told they can't go there. So that's a great disappointment, and every
Democrat leadership has not softened on demands for Republicans to sign off on a definite deal to extend Obamacare subsidies.
Well, I have good news for the president. Meet with Democrats, reopen the government, fix the ACA crisis. That's the best way to put this crisis behind us.
It's unclear what Republicans plan to do if today's vote fails again. If senators don't see any hope for a deal coming to fruition, they could leave Washington for the next week. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
No employment report for an unprecedented second straight month. The Labor Department today will not publish the closely watched document as the government remains shut. Fears are also mounting that October's report might not be released when full operations resume. September's employment report is likely to be published within days of the government being reopened, but economists are not sure the Labor Department would be able to produce a full report for October, as no data was collected during the month. The consumer price report that requires the physical collection of data is also in danger of not being published. And a top economic advisor for President Trump says the government shutdown is worse than expected. Here's Kevin Hassett speaking on Fox Business earlier today.
The impact on the economy is far worse than we expected because it's gone on for so long. And so there are now like Goldman estimates that it's over 1% or 1.5% of GDP. I think we were thinking that we're going to have at least 3% growth in the fourth quarter. I think now we're expecting something like half that because of the harm by the Democrats' policy. And so,
Democrats are pushing for specific health care demands. They want to undo GOP Medicaid cuts and extend Obamacare subsidies. Hassett said the travel and leisure sector is heavily hit by the shutdown. He warned that this has ripple effects, such as fewer business deals being made. He said permits are also not being processed and construction projects are starting to slow down. Hassett also pointed out that the shutdown will discourage people from taking government jobs and harm efficient government operation in the long run. But he said he expects the U.S. economy to bounce back quickly once the federal government reopens. The effects of the record-breaking government shutdown continue to mount as flight reductions at 40 major U.S. airports begin at 6 a.m. Eastern. The FAA said air traffic must be reduced by 4% from this morning. It will ramp up to 6% by November 11th, 8% by November 13th, and up to 10% by the 14th. Airlines preemptively canceled hundreds of flights ahead of the order. According to data from tracking website FlightAware, as of this morning, more than 1,000 U.S. flights were canceled. That's over 4 times the number of U.S. cancellations a day earlier. United, Southwest, and Delta Airlines already began canceling flights last night, affecting airports in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. Yesterday evening, Delta said it will be canceling 170 flights today and fewer on Saturday because it's a lighter travel day. Southwest said it will cancel 120 flights for Friday, and United said it plans to cut 4% of its flights Friday through Sunday. We're showing a list of some of the affected airports here. Federal officials say reducing the number of flights will make flying safer during the ongoing government shutdown. According to estimates, the flight cuts could represent as many as 1,800 flights and upwards of 260,000 seats combined. Here's more about the flight reductions.
I want to talk to you about the data. So first, some have asked what's happened in the airspace. So a few points that we look at that are sending us in the wrong direction. Right? So number one, loss of separation in the airspace. So that's the minimum distance we keep between aircraft to keep them safe. We've seen breaches, more breaches in regard to that loss of separation. We see more incursions on tarmacs throughout the country. And we have more complaints from pilots about stress from air traffic controllers and more complaints about the lack of responsiveness from controllers. So that data is going in the wrong direction, not in the right direction, which made us make the decision we have to actually take additional measures to reduce the pressure in our system.
Duffy said there's a higher level of fatigue with the air traffic controllers. They've been working 10-hour shifts 6 days a week. The transportation secretary said international flights will not be impacted because the U.S. has international agreements with foreign countries. But he did say that airlines will lose millions of dollars taking down flights, and they're not happy about the reductions. Duffy again urged senators to reopen the government and end the shutdown. The federal government says it has revoked 80,000 visas this year as part of a sweeping national security effort. The State Department said today the revocations involved individuals linked to terrorism, crime, or public safety threats, as well as visa overstays. Officials also said 16,000 visas were canceled this year for DUI offenses, 12,000 for assault, and 8,000 for theft. The State Department says the Trump administration will not hesitate to revoke visas from foreigners who undermine our laws or threaten national security. Recently, the department invalidated visas of foreign nationals for publicly celebrating the assassination of Turning Point founder Charlie Kirk. Democrats have criticized the Trump administration's revocation of student visas, saying it's been done in many cases without justification or explanation. A federal judge in Oregon will rule today on whether President Trump violated federal law by deploying National Guard troops to Portland. District Judge Karen Immergut's decision follows a high-profile trial testing the limits of presidential power to use the military on U.S. soil.
Troop deployments remain on hold under a temporary court order, and Immergut will decide whether to make that block permanent. The case hinges on whether the protests in Portland amounted to a rebellion that could legally justify a military response. At least 32 people have been charged with federal crimes stemming from the Portland protests since they began in June. About half the defendants were charged with assaulting federal officers, including 14 felonies and 7 misdemeanors. Charging documents describe protesters kicking and shoving officers, usually while resisting arrest. Prosecutors say protesters have also spat on officers and thrown rocks, a water bottle, and a kitchen knife.
Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem shared a post on X today saying ICE has received more than 200,000 applications from patriotic Americans who want to defend the homeland by removing the worst of the worst criminal illegal aliens from the U.S. She said Americans are answering their country's call to serve and help remove murderers, pedophiles, rapists, terrorists, and gang members from our country. The State Department said 80,000 visas have been revoked. Joining us to discuss is Gerard Filitti, a foreign affairs analyst and attorney specializing in international law. So, Gerard, good afternoon to you. How much discretion does the administration have to revoke visas on this scale?
The administration has tremendous discretion under the law, under immigration statutes, to revoke visas and to deny access or entry to America by foreign nationals. As a condition for entry in the United States, you're agreeing to a set of conditions. These include not committing crime. It includes not taking policy positions that are adverse to U.S. policy interests. So essentially, the government has a large latitude in removing immigrants on a visa, whether that's a temporary or a work visa or a student visa, if they do not agree with the conduct of these immigrants.
So can you clarify for us legally what constitutes as a threat to national security? This has been referenced as for some of the reasons for the revocations. How is the general term support for terrorism interpreted?
Support for terrorism is interpreted as it is in federal laws that deal with support for terrorism, meaning advocacy beyond just words for terrorist organizations. However, what's different is that the federal government can determine that support is not just a terrorist support, but it is a foreign policy consideration. So really, we have to draw the distinction between two different categories. Terrorist support, as we call it colloquially, as we're talking about it on air, doesn't really mean material support, doesn't really mean helping a terrorist organization. What it means in the eyes of the Trump administration is taking a foreign policy position that's adverse to the interests of America. For example, supporting Hamas against Israel or supporting other designated terrorist organizations, propagandizing for them. So it's not the same type of material support, for example, providing weapons or money, but it is providing propaganda services and advocating for them.
And Gerard, how do you view the administration's screening of social media accounts of visa holders? Is this acting within the law?
It is acting within the law for most visa holders from most countries where we do not have an easy access reciprocal treaty. People who apply for visas have to undergo screening. In many parts of the world, they have to present themselves to the U.S. embassy or consulate for an interview and provide all sorts of biographical and background information, including criminal background checks about themselves in order to get that visa. So this is definitely not unprecedented. This is the way the system works. What's different now is that the administration is vigorously looking at the social media profiles of people that have already been admitted to the country, arguing that the Biden administration and prior administrations were very lax when it came to these background checks.
So can you address this, Gerard? Because legal visa holders in the U.S. have some First Amendment protections as well. So could you address how the visas of 6 foreigners accused of celebrating Charlie Kirk's death were revoked?
Well, that's the issue that ultimately may have to be heard by the Supreme Court. We all understand that First Amendment protections apply within America. However, there has traditionally been a carve-out in immigration law that does not apply the entirety of the First Amendment rights that you have the freedom of speech to people who hold these visas, for the simple reason that the government can regulate who it allows in the country and on what grounds. So it's very much like being a guest in someone's house when you're here on a visa. If you're saying things, you don't have the same liberties that you would if you were a citizen by birth or naturalization of the United States. So for many years, courts have held a distinction between between the First Amendment rights enjoyed by American citizens and those applied to people who are here on a visa. Now, when it comes to the nature of the speech, when we have speech that is so shocking and traumatic that it affects the national security of the United States, or it propagandizes murder, or it encourages violent acts, then that's not going to be held when it's done by foreigners to the same First Amendment protections as a citizen would have.
Okay, so Gerard, I want to present this argument to you. Now, I'm not a legal expert, but can it or can it not be argued that a certain degree of ideological vetting might help ensure that individuals entering the country share at least, a baseline respect for democracy and human rights?
Well, I think ideological vetting would be something that could show whether someone is sharing the values and principles, the democratic values and principles of the United States. But in practice, this is very different to implement because we don't really know what is in a person's heart and mind. The best we can do is look at statements this person has made, look at their criminal background, look at their educational background, and see whether there's anything in their history that suggests animosity to our values. That's what the Trump administration is doing now in vetting foreigners, looking to see what it can tell about the character of these people and whether admitting them to the United States will pose a danger because their character is inherently contrary to American principles of democracy.
Can you speak to the difference, if any, between free speech protections for foreign nationals in the U.S. versus actual citizens?
To some extent, and there has not been that much jurisprudence, that much law about this over the years. There have been some cases, but not nearly enough. And I do think the Supreme Court will ultimately weigh in. But the way things have been interpreted is it's almost a sliding scale. When you're a citizen, pretty much everything is First Amendment that's not slander, defamatory, a threat, or incitement to violence. When you are here on a visa, that depends, your speech protections depend on the nature of your speech. If you are arguing or propagandizing against the US government, for example, or supporting terrorism, that's not going to be protected by the First Amendment. If, on the other hand, you are merely saying something that some people dislike but otherwise does not impact the US government or foreign policy or national security, courts will probably rule that you do have a First Amendment right to say it. So the bottom line is it depends on what people are saying when they exercise their First Amendment rights.
So, Gerard, do legal visa holders have the right to challenge any revocation in court?
Generally speaking, there are some protections. There are some due process protections. And again, it depends on the type of visa. It depends on whether you're here as a visitor on a visitor visa, which can very easily be revoked. It's not the same level of scrutiny, for example, as if you are here on a work visa or an immigrant visa. If you are here on the type of visa that gives you residency in the United States, then you can have that challenge with an immigration court. You do have rights to exercise to fight the revocation and the deportation. But if you're merely here as a visitor, then you are pretty much out of luck.
Okay, Gerard, just to end the interview, can you talk to us about what you think might be the impacts of such revocations at such a scale?
Well, I think the impact on this is playing out more on university campuses than anywhere else, because this is one of the populations that's largely affected. We had some 8,000 revocations of student visas in this batch. And when you're revoking student visas, universities change in nature. We know that we have many students, especially graduate students at Harvard and many other institutions who are here, whether it's from communist China or from other countries, that are benefiting from our education system. So these revocations change the character, maybe for the better, of our education system. But in general, the message it sends to foreigners is that we will hold you to the same standards that you hold us. Many countries, most countries, have restrictions on immigration and visitors to their countries. What we're doing is merely doing what other countries do, which is vetting the people we allow in.
Okay, Gerard, always good to talk to you. Hope you have a great weekend. Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Cornell University has agreed to pay $60 million in order to get federal funding back. The Ivy League institution must also comply with civil rights laws. We have more news after this break.
Don't wait. Call now to find out about our Medicare plan.
Why do we have to sit through so many Medicare commercials this time of year? It's endless.
Good question, Edith. I'm glad you asked. We see so many commercials this time of year because it's the only time, other than special circumstances, when Medicare recipients can change their plan for Part C. Original Medicare only covers Parts A and B, but a Medicare Advantage plan has additional benefits that Original Medicare doesn't offer.
So now's the time to fill those spaces?
That's right, Archie. And every year, there are changes to what benefits you may receive from your Part C plan. Call right now to find out what plan best suits your needs.
It's easy, easy, don't delay. Pick up the phone and call today.
Call now for your free Medicare review.
1-833-469-1754. 1-833-469-1754.
You may now return to your regularly scheduled programming.
You are not hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten. You are not hopeless. Though you have been broken, your innocence stolen. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find
On streets across America, young people are homeless, abused, in danger. Covenant House is helping young people with nowhere else to turn. But the need is overwhelming. Please call or go online now with your gift of $19 a month. You'll help provide hot meals, safe shelter, medical care, and love to more than 2,000 young people who sleep at a Covenant House every night. Homeless young people are afraid and alone. Your monthly donation right now will show them they are loved and safe.
I have no words to express how Covenant House changed my life.
Call or go online now and give just $19 a month. We'll send you this comforting blanket as a reminder of the difference you're making in a young person's life. Call or go online now to safeplacetosleep.org.
The Trump administration is asking a federal appeals court to pause a judge's order to fully fund SNAP benefits. The administration says there is only enough money for a partial payment in November. In a court filing, the administration called the situation a crisis by congressional failure, saying it can only be solved by congressional action. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on yesterday's court decision.
Rhode Island Judge John McConnell Jr. says the Department of Agriculture must pay states the money by today. It will go to approximately 42 million recipients of SNAP. McConnell said, "People have gone without for too long. Not making payments to them for even another day is simply unacceptable." USDA officials had declined to fund SNAP amid the government shutdown, arguing that they could not use emergency funding or revenue from tariffs. The administration had only partially funded the program, citing limits on contingency funds and reluctance to tap tariff revenue. But McConnell said that decision violated his earlier order and caused irreparable harm. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt responded that the administration has been complying, saying the president is using emergency funds meant for war and catastrophes because of the ongoing government shutdown. Vice President J.D. Vance criticized the ruling, calling it absurd.
Because you have a federal judge effectively telling us what we have to do in the midst of a Democrat government shutdown.
Vance blamed the Democrats and called on them to open the government.
Then we can fund SNAP, and we can also do a lot of other good things for the American people. But in the midst of a shutdown, we can't have a federal court telling the president how he has to triage the situation.
The judge's order was in response to a challenge from cities and nonprofits, complaining the administration was only offering to cover 65% of the maximum benefit. Lawyers for the Trump administration filed a motion to appeal shortly after the judge's ruling. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Cornell University has agreed to pay $60 million and comply with civil rights law in exchange for restoring federal funding. Education Secretary Linda McMahon called the agreement a transformative commitment that puts a focus on merit, rigor, and truth-seeking. Cornell's president said the deal ensures the university's academic freedom while restoring more than $250 million in research funding. The university agreed to pay $30 million to the government, along with another $30 million for research that will support American farmers. The campus must also provide admissions data to ensure race is no longer being considered as a factor in admissions decisions. In 2023, the Supreme Court ruled that affirmative action in the university admissions process was unconstitutional. Maryland officials sued President Donald Trump's administration yesterday. The lawsuit is for blocking the previously approved construction of new FBI headquarters just outside the nation's capital.
The president's plan is not just illegal. Frankly, it just lacks common sense. And his foolishness will put our public servants in jeopardy. The big problem with the current FBI building is that it lacks the modern security provisions and protections that the Bureau needs in 2025. So to be frank, the building is too old.
Maryland Governor Wes Moore criticized the Trump administration's plan to move the FBI's headquarters to the Ronald Reagan Building complex rather than to Greenbelt, Maryland. The Biden administration selected Greenbelt as the site for the new FBI building after planning the move for years. FBI Director Kash Patel said the Reagan building offers a faster, more cost-effective solution while remaining near the Department of Justice and other national security agencies. It's been a decade since the Supreme Court's landmark ruling to allow same-sex couples to marry. Now Supreme Court justices are weighing a bid to overturn that decision. The pending appeal comes from Kim Davis. She is a former clerk in Kentucky who refused to orders of issuing same-sex marriage licenses in 2015 due to her religious beliefs. The Davis appeal is one of dozens the justices will consider to hear in a private meeting today. The court could announce as soon as Monday that it will do with the case what it will. It could also hold the appeal for weeks, which often happens when one or more justices want to write an opinion about a decision to deny a case. The Fifth Circuit of Appeals has canceled the lower court's block on a Texas law that bans drag performances in the presence of children. The case was sent back to the lower court for further review. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals on Thursday canceled a lower court ruling that blocked a Texas bill from banning drag performances for children. A panel of 3 judges ordered a narrower review of the bill and found that only one of the plaintiffs had standing to challenge it. The San Antonio-based 360 Queen Entertainment had standing because it conducted performances that, quote, exaggerated sexual characteristics, which likely fell under the statute in question. The bill, called Senate Bill 12, was signed by Governor Greg Abbott in 2023. It makes it a crime to host or perform a sexually oriented performance in public or in the presence of minors. A lower court struck down the bill on grounds that it violated free speech rights. The Fifth Circuit majority disagreed and stated that most of the plaintiffs' conduct didn't fall within the constraints that the bill intended. For example, it said a vendor handing out condoms is not a sexual performance. The panel dismissed the claims of several plaintiffs and ordered that only the Attorney General could be sued by the remaining plaintiff. Then it sent the case back to the lower court to apply a different test to assess whether or not the bill violates the First Amendment. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
China's exports unexpectedly contracted in October 2025, marking the first decline in nearly 2 years. What's behind this? We talked to an economist after this break.
There is a road laid out for me.
Boxes everywhere. And this is going to be Addie's room.
I am blind.
You're really going to like it. I hope so. Yeah.
I know this road is there for me. There is a long way.
First night here, but Amy seems cool.
Waist down by the river. I am blind, but I need not see.
I got this.
I know this road is there for me.
Okay.
If I'm really free. Take me down to the river and wash me.
That first time seeing my son, I feel like my life did a 180. I was already trying to change my perspective of life and really just be a father figure that I never had. Being present is the most important part. I'm still growing every day. Becoming a better version of myself. To be the better mirror for my son. I mean, he's just grown. He's becoming his own person. Man, first I saw him dance, bro, he brings the vibes, you know what I'm saying? He brings the party no matter what. He really a definition of like why he loves somebody. And I love him to the death of me.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Trump says there's a very good chance he'll meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Budapest. This as Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban hails a golden age of U.S.-Hungary relations while seeking exemptions to U.S. sanctions on Russian oil. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu, who's at the White House. Mari, good afternoon. Can you tell us what is the latest on President Trump's efforts to end the Russia-Ukraine war?
Don, good afternoon. Yes, President Trump today is now saying that there's a, quote, very good chance that he'll be meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Budapest, but that he'll have more to say about this potential Putin meeting after his lunch with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, citing that Orban, quote, knows and understands Putin very well. Meanwhile, President Trump also says that he's considering sanctions exemptions for Hungary. Here's his reasoning. Take a look.
Because it's very difficult for him to get the oil and gas from other areas. As you know, they don't have the advantage of having sea. They don't have the ports, and so they have a difficult problem. There's another country that has that same problem, by the way. But when you look at what's happened with Europe, many of those countries they don't have those problems, and they buy a lot of oil and gas from Russia. And as they know, I'm very disturbed by that.
This is coming after President Trump imposed what he called a tremendous sanctions on Russia's two biggest oil companies back at the end of October, while calling on Moscow to immediately agree to a ceasefire. And according to the Atlantic Council Research Group, Hungary imports 86% of its oil from Russia. And Orban is saying that an exemption to sanctions is needed, as Hungary is a landlocked country that's completely dependent on Russian pipelines for its energy supply. And as to the relations between the two leaders, there was much mutual praise in the meeting, with Orban hailing the meeting as a restoration of U.S.-Hungary relations after what he calls a, quote, ruined relationship during the previous administration. Take a look.
So now we are in quite a good position to open up a new chapter, let's say a golden age between United States and Hungary, and we have plenty of suggestions for today: economic cooperation, military cooperation, and political cooperation. We are kind of a special island of difference in a liberal ocean in Europe, and we consider ourselves as a modern Christian government. That's the proper category to describe what we are doing.
Orban also says that the only pro-peace governments are the U.S. and Hungary. He says that other governments prefer to continue the war because they think that Ukraine can win it, calling that a, quote, misunderstanding of the situation. But there was a moment in the meeting when President Trump turned and asked him if Ukraine can win, and Orban responds, miracles can happen. Don, back to you.
Okay, Mari, thank you. China's exports unexpectedly contracted in October 2025, marking the first decline in nearly 2 years. Joining us to discuss is Daniel Lacalle, chief economist at Tressis, international financial analyst, and the author of the book Freedom or Equality. So Daniel, good afternoon to you. So what do you think the reason is that led to this contraction in exports?
Thank you very much. A number of reasons. Number one, the Chinese exporters have been unable to find alternative homes for their exports outside of the United States. And some of them have been unable to absorb the elevated levels of tariffs. Not only that, but many of these exporters have found themselves with very significant working capital challenges. So we have seen throughout the course of these months how the so repeated narrative that China would be able to basically offset all of its exports to the United States with alternative routes didn't happen. We also saw a significant crackdown on origin washing from the United States with the agreements with Vietnam and other countries. And all of this has put a very, very significant level of pressure on particularly those exporters that had narrower margins and were unable to absorb the tariffs.
So, Daniel, has U.S. demand for Chinese products decreased because of tariffs? We're seeing exports to the U.S. down 25%.
Well, it's not that demand has declined, it's that there is demand for a very significant proportion of these products at the right price. You know, another of the things that I repeatedly debunked throughout all of the negative comments about the Liberation Day was this idea that United States customers had almost unlimited demand or inelastic demand no matter what the price. It is true that U.S. customers have quite an appetite for cheap products as long as they're cheap. So when many of these exporters have been unable to absorb the tariffs, and at the same time they have had to deal with rising freight charges and also rising financing charges, all those things have certainly created a competitive disadvantage for many of them, and they have been unable to sell elsewhere, and definitely to find different countries that would purchase those products. The European Union, for example, has reduced quite significantly also its demand for some of the cheaper products, of the below $250 packages.
So, Daniel, this contraction in exports, does China have enough capacity in terms of domestic consumption to offset that contraction of exports?
No, unfortunately, it doesn't. China is a very, very big economy, but it's a very poor economy when you look at what the average consumer has. About 60% of the population in China make less than $300 a month. And obviously, the ability of most Chinese citizens to save and to consume is massively lower than that of an American consumer in terms of access to credit, credit cards, and obviously the ability to save some money. No, so one of the problems that China is dealing with is the double whammy of overcapacity at an industrial level, in which most of the industries are dealing with much higher levels of capacity and production than what the internal demand and certainly external demand would suggest, added to an internal market that simply cannot be the solution to the challenges of exports abroad. We often hear from Chinese officials that if Chinese consumers increase their consumption by $1,000 a year, that would immediately solve all of the problems of the Chinese economy. Well, $1,000 a year is a fortune for the vast majority of Chinese citizens, which are way, way, way behind the figures that we see in cities like Shanghai or like Beijing.
So it seems like, based on what you're saying of Chinese officials, it seems like China does have a desire, right, to sort of rebalance its economy towards consumption-led growth. So what are the challenges? You mentioned some of them, but is it entirely possible, if given enough time, to rebalance its economy?
Well, if you remember, for example, the Japanese crisis at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, the government was looking to offset the challenges of the external market by generating a level of stimulus for the internal demand. However, that obviously could happen because at the time, Japan had one of the most developed and richest consumers in the world. This is not the case in China. The problem is the following: you cannot bake the cake and eat it. You cannot, on the one hand, have an incredibly competitive, low-cost exporting and producing nation in which salaries are very, very low and in which employment is elevated, like the Chinese economy is, and at the same time expect that those citizens are going to offset the global demand of products by consuming more. it's virtually impossible. You cannot have a population that has very low wages, no relevant elements of social security, etc., very, very limited levels of protection, and at the same time expect them to consume significantly. That cannot happen. You would have to wait for the Chinese economy to become a high salary and high productivity economy, and that is way, way, way ahead, if any, in the future, because obviously the Chinese economy, unfortunately, in the last 10 years has been closing instead of opening. No? So you cannot basically be, on the one hand, a cheap labor country while having large domestic consumers.
So, Daniel, how do you assess the long-term outlook then for China's economy based on what you're seeing as the current trajectory headed?
Well, they obviously need a trade deal urgently. That's very, very clear. We see it in the working capital figures of the Chinese companies. We see it in the industrial figures. We see it in the port figures, all of this. That shows that there is an absolute urgency of a trade deal. Number two, that trade deal must come with the opening of the Chinese economy and becoming more open also about human rights, about intellectual property, so many things in which they're lagging behind compared to other nations. No? So the opportunities for China are gigantic. It's obviously a very productive, hugely efficient country in which there's tremendous level of seriousness and commitment from the labor force, etc. But all those things cannot happen if the economy does not open, independent institutions are not implemented, and at the same time, the challenges of intellectual property and human rights are not addressed. All those things can be addressed, but it cannot happen with all these plans that basically seem to look at the past of socialist central planning as the solution for the future. That is not going to work.
Okay, Daniel, just one final question. Do you see China's export sector picking up? And what is your advice for those looking to invest in China right now?
I do see the Chinese exporting sector picking up if there is a trade deal, which is something that we need to see very, very clearly. So for those investors looking at the depressed companies that are facing all these challenges that I just mentioned, I would say maybe there is an opportunity, but you need to wait for a trade deal. You need to have a solid, clear trade deal in which China commits to opening the economy and eliminating all of these trade barriers that we have mentioned so many times. And then you may see an immediate positive reaction, but you need to see the trade deal. You cannot just wait for months on end thinking that these companies are going to solve their problems, because those are created by all these challenges that I have mentioned throughout the interview.
Well, all right, Daniel, it's always good to speak with you, and I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Same to you. Thank you very much, Don. Always a pleasure.
Next, the government shutdown is now at the 38th day. Senators are speaking on the Senate floor to debate. Let's take a listen to Senate Majority Leader John Thune.
Working for the American people. Democrats have said we must address the health care crisis. But Republicans have repeatedly said they won't negotiate to lower the health care costs until the government reopens. So let's find a path to honor both positions. Democrats would like to see an end to this shutdown, and we want to respect Leader Thune's desire not to negotiate on ACA until after the government reopens. Therefore, we'd like to offer a simple proposal that would reopen the government and extend the ACA premium tax credits simultaneously, and then have the opportunity to start negotiating longer-term solutions to health care costs. Let's do all three. I've spoken with my caucus, and Democrats are offering a very simple compromise. Democrats are ready to clear the way to quickly pass a government funding bill that includes health care affordability. Leader Thune just needs to add a clean one-year extension of the ACA tax credits to the CR so that we can immediately address rising health care costs. That's not a negotiation. It's an extension of current law, something we do all the time around here, as we all know. But we also offer this. Let's create a bipartisan committee that will continue negotiations after the government reopens on reforms, ahead of next year's enrollment period, to provide long-term certainty that health care costs will be more affordable. This proposal reopens the government and ensures working families who are shopping right now for their health care get certainty and financial relief. While open enrollment has begun, insurers can update their rates after we pass a simple extension of the tax credits. With this approach, we do not negotiate health care in the shutdown, as Leader Thune has maintained he wishes, and the American people get the tax credit extension they want. That is what many of our Republican colleagues have floated over the last 6 weeks as a compromise, a one-year tax credit extension and reforms to the credit beyond that. We will agree with the Republican request not to start negotiations until after the government reopens. All Republicans have to do is say yes to extend current law for 1 year. It makes sense. And since what we're proposing is only a simple extension of current law, the Senate could do this within a few hours. This is a reasonable offer that opens the government, deals with health care affordability, and begins a process of negotiating reforms to the ACA tax credits for the future. Now, the ball is in the Republicans' court. We need Republicans to just say yes. I yield to Senator Peters.
Thank you, Leader Schumer.
Senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Madam President.
And that was Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer proposing a new method to end the government shutdown, saying now the ball is in the Republicans' court and they just need Republicans to say yes to this new proposal. All right, Michigan lawmakers are finding out more about the Chinese regime's efforts to take photos and gather information at U.S. military installations. The head of the Michigan National Guard testified before state lawmakers this week about the practice.
The People's Republic of China are very active in their information gathering, intelligence collection. Really, you see it through businesses, you see it through military sites, training. It's not uncommon. It's actually, I'd almost say it's pretty routine for Chinese nationals, PRC, People's Republic of China nationals, to be tasked to go somewhere and actively try to get onto a base, a military base, try to gain entry into a restricted area. And if they get entry, to collect certain pieces of information, whatever it may be of interest. But it's fairly routine and well established that this is an active, ongoing.
Major General Paul Rogers pointed to an incident in 2023. The military found 5 Chinese nationals taking photos near classified military equipment inside Camp Grayling in northern Michigan. That's the training facility for the Michigan Army National Guard. This led to an FBI investigation. The 5 were identified as Chinese students at the Michigan University, but they all managed to flee the U.S. to avoid arrest. The general warns that this is not an isolated incident, and it's been happening everywhere.
A year ago, we had 2 individuals show up at the gate at Selfridge Air National Guard Base. They wanted to go and visit the museum. And they were both PRC nationals. And they got turned away by the guards there because they're not allowed to have access. That alone is like, okay, well, that could happen, you know, if somebody's likes military aircraft and they want to show up somewhere. But the fact that those same 2 individuals showed up 3 days later at the same gate hoping to find a guard that would not be doing their due diligence and tried to gain access again using the exact same excuse. It's a constant probing.
Yeah.
And it's a little cat and mouse, and they're not breaking any laws, right? So there's nothing that can be done about it, but you know it's not with good intent.
According to the Justice Department, back in 2023, Chinese nationals were sentenced to prison for illegally taking photos inside the U.S. Naval Air Station in Key West, Florida. Notably, 2 of them were also students at the University of Michigan. Major airlines are waiving change fees as flight cuts hit 40 airports. Experts say avoid layovers and have a backup plan. What travelers need to know next after this break.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our biggest 3-in-1 sale ever with a limited edition product, a back-in-stock special, and a closeout deal you won't find anywhere else. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get our MyPillow bed sheets only $29.88. Any color, any style, any size, even kings. Regular $119.98, only $29.88. Once they're gone for good. How about our My Towels? They're finally back in stock, but not for long. Get a 6-piece My Towel set, regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And for the first time and the only time ever, get our limited edition premium My Pillows. They're made with Giza cotton and designer gusset. Queen $17.98, Kings only $19.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get the best offers ever. Quantities are extremely limited, so order now.
According to ancient Chinese medicine, purslane is considered a medicinal herb and is used to help lower cholesterol, improve vascular functions, and prevent diabetes. Perilla seeds can nourish the lungs and spleen. It is used to treat asthma and improve pulmonary functions. Puritang green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds from Hwangmae Mountain in South Korea. It contains over 90% of omega-3, 6, 7, and 9. The highest concentration possible without chemical additives. The soft gel is made of natural seaweed. It is 100% organic and vegan. Both adults and children can take it with peace of mind. Ancient recipes were passed down from heaven to bring prosperity and longevity. Puritang green vegetable omega-3.
Judge Napolitano here. Are you watching gold prices? They're not just rising, they're soaring. In just 12 months, gold has surged to more than $3,700 an ounce. And now, Goldman Sachs, the same experts who predicted that rise, are saying gold could reach $4,500 or more in the next year. So what's behind this historic move? Global currencies are falling and big money is in a panic. That's why big banks and billionaires are buying gold in record amounts. And as long as paper money keeps losing value, they'll keep buying. So do what I did. Buy gold from the only company I trust, Lear Capital. Give them a call today. You'll be glad you did.
Claim your free gold investor kit now. Discover how easy it is to own gold, shipped to you or added to your IRA. Also ask how you can get up to $20,000 in bonus gold with a qualified purchase. Call 800-885-6000. 800-885-6000. 800-885-6000.
If you're traveling soon, check the status of your flight with your airline. Some airline loyalty programs make it easier to cancel flights purchased with miles. The airlines that are temporarily providing waivers to change flights without fees include American, Delta, Southwest, United, and Frontier. Here are some more tips for people flying or booking flights in the near future.
There's a number of things you should be doing to be aware.
Experts say travelers who plan to fly soon should know their options. Experts advise people departing within 10 days to keep an eye on their airline's app for changes. They say carriers likely will try to preserve their hub-to-hub operations and cut regional flights instead.
It may not be a bad idea to delay travel if it's non-essential, or if you're in a smaller city, perhaps to drive to one of the larger hubs if it's close by,
and also consider buying a backup ticket.
Several airlines are letting passengers change their flights for free. The law requires them to issue refunds for cancellations, but they're unlikely to reimburse stranded passengers for meals or hotels. For people planning to buy tickets soon, experts suggest booking with airlines directly. They say that makes it easier to change flights. They recommend avoiding layovers if possible. And the Transportation Secretary suggests bracing for Thanksgiving impacts if the government stays closed.
If we have staffing triggers and we don't have enough controllers in an airspace where we did cut 10%, you might see additional delays.
A vivid blue diamond, which experts say is of the most exceptional quality, will go under the hammer next week. It's expected to fetch up to $30 million. The pear-shaped stone weighs 9.5 carats. The diamond was named after and belonged to American heiress Rachel Bunny Mellon. She was famous for her philanthropy and as a garden designer. She gained fame for designing the White House Rose Garden in the 1960s. Christie's auction house refers to the diamond as the Mellon Blue. Here's the company's global head of jewelry.
This is a vivid blue diamond, which is already extremely rare. You know, we see very few of these come up for sale at auction. So then furthermore, to have something that is almost 10 carats is exceptional. This is one of the best blue diamonds that we've seen for sale at Christie's.
The Mellon Blue Diamond was last seen publicly in 2014 when it was offered at an auction in New York. Christie's describes the stone as a once-in-a-lifetime purchase. The sale will be held in Geneva, Switzerland on November 11th. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth discusses the Trump administration's plans to overhaul the defense acquisition process. Hegseth addresses top executives in the defense industry in the Naval War College in Washington, D.C. Stay tuned for more news after this break.
That truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. Shen Yun. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.
I trod on my glasses yesterday, and I had to pay up front for a new pair that I can't even pick up for another 10 days. So I looked for another way, and I found Select Specs. I ordered online. My new glasses just arrived this morning, and I can pay over the next few weeks. This is the way to buy glasses.
See now, pay later with Select Specs. Next day delivery and deferred payment options only at selectspecs.com.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
They're just young people, hungry, homeless, and vulnerable. Abused youth often feel safer on the street. Now, more than ever, that's the most dangerous place of all. Covenant House is helping young adults facing homelessness. We're providing safe shelter to thousands, but the need is overwhelming, and no young person is ever turned away. Please call or go online now with your gift of $19 a month to help a young person.